Hey, what's up everybody? 8-Bit Flashback here. Today I'll be checking out the Bitt Boy V2 with custom firmware version 3.2 installed. And with this little handheld, you can play quite a few different systems, such as NES, Game Boy, Neo Geo, Arcade, Super Nintendo, Sega Genesis, and more. So the looks of this is heavily inspired by the original Game Boy, but it does quite a bit more than the original. It features a 4-button layout and a 2.4-inch IPS screen with 320 by 240 resolution. And it uses the F1C 500S CPU that can reach speeds up to 900 MHz with 32 MB of RAM. It does not come with any games pre-installed, but the games can easily be added via a microSD card. And to supply power to the Bitt Boy, it uses a 700 mAh rechargeable lithium battery. Located on the bottom of the handheld is the AV port and the power port for recharging, and it looks like you get around 3 hours of playing time. Also included inside the box is an AV cable so you can connect to a TV to play games, and there's a micro USB cable for recharging the Bitt Boy. And just for fun, here's a size comparison between the original Game Boy and Bitt Boy. It looks pretty similar, just a lot smaller. Here's more size comparisons with other Game Boys, and it looks like the Game Boy Pocket is the closest in size. Now let's go ahead and power this up and check out the software. So I'm using the newest custom firmware version 3.2, which I now believe is pre-installed on the latest Bitt Boys being sold. However, if you already own a Bitt Boy version 2, it's very easy to flash the new software to a micro SD card, and I will leave links down below for more info regarding the custom firmware. So without the custom firmware, you're limited to just a few systems, NES and Game Boy. But with the custom firmware, you get a good selection of emulators for various different systems, such as DOSBox, NES, Game Boy, Neo Geo, Game Boy Advance, MAME, WonderSwan, Mega Drive or Genesis, Master System, Super Nintendo, Atari, and PC Engine. There's also a PlayStation emulator, but at this point it's not worth using. The performance is not so great. The Bitt Boy is a bit underpowered for PlayStation emulation. It's more designed for 2D gaming from the 16-bit and 8-bit eras, but it does handle some 24-bit and 32-bit systems. To control the volume, you just hold the select button while pushing the A button to lower the volume and the B button to raise the volume. For the screen brightness, you want to hold the select button while pushing the top T button to make it brighter, and if you want to make it dimmer, just push the bottom T button. For saving the games, most of the emulators have a save state feature that will allow you to save the game in real time and resume later where you left off. Most of the emulator menus can be accessed by pushing the R button, but some can be accessed by pushing start and select at the same time. As far as the controls go, everything feels nice. The buttons respond well, and the D-pad seems to be doing a good job. The sound is okay too, it seems clear without much distortion. And the screen looks great. Due to it being an IPS screen, the viewing angles are good from all directions. That's one thing that I'm a huge fan of is IPS screens. There's a lot of non-IPS screens out there that are cheaper, but they usually have horrible viewing angles. With the IPS screens, you usually get great viewing angles. As far as the emulation goes, I would consider it decent. With some games such as Mega Man 3, for the NES, I experienced some slowdown when multiple moving objects were on the screen at the same time. And with most of the emulators, I did notice light screen tearing being present, but for the most part, this did not affect the gameplay, and the majority of the games ran it close to full speed. Most of the emulators do give you an option for the screen aspect ratio, so if you want to go full screen, you can. As far as the screen tearing goes, it's more noticeable on games where you're scrolling at a slow speed, like this game right here. If you notice the background, you can see that screen tearing just a little bit. With games like Tetris, where it's more of a vertical game, you don't really get any issues with the screen tearing. Here's TMNT Nexus for the Game Boy Advance, and I was actually surprised by the emulation doing fairly well. And now I'm just going to play on here for just a few, showing you a couple Game Boy Advance games in action. Here's Neo Geo, and I've only tested a couple games so far, but the gameplay is better than I thought it'd be. This game in particular, World Heroes, usually gives me a hard time when playing on emulators, mainly a lot of slowdown. And when testing on the Bitt Boy, I didn't notice much slowdown. Here's the MAME emulator, and I did have a little bit of trouble finding compatible ROMs. Here's a quick hint for you though: if you Google search MAME for all ROMs, that might help you get in the right direction. The game I'm playing right now is an arcade version of Miss Pac-Man, but this is a clone, and it plays pretty well, but I was having issues with the aspect ratios. For the best compatibility, I would suggest only trying 80s or older arcade games. Anything newer will probably give you some issues. So other arcade games like Moon Patrol and Secret Agent did well, but when testing Mortal Kombat, it was not so good. And we'll see that here in just a few. Here's a Sega Genesis emulator or Mega Drive depending on your location, and the gameplay seems decent. Here's a Sega Master System emulator with Sonic the Hedgehog 2 playing, and it seems to be doing well. This is a Super Nintendo or Super Famicom emulator, and for the most part the games played decent, but I did find a few games not playing so great, like Mortal Kombat 3. And the last system on the list I'm going to test out today is the PC Engine, and so far, so good. So overall, I like the Bitt Boy. For $39, I think it's a fair price. The emulation itself has issues, but the ability to play multiple systems on the go makes it worthwhile. And there's thousands of games that I would consider playable on the Bitt Boy. If you're looking for close to perfect emulation, the Bitt Boy might not be for you. And if you have large hands, that could also be an issue because it's pretty small. Myself, I would prefer it to be just a little bit bigger, but it still works for me just fine. As far as the looks go, I think it looks awesome. It looks just like a mini Game Boy. And if you are interested in getting one of these, I'll make sure to post some links down below. Okay, it's time for me to go, and if you like this video, if you could, hit that like button, and have yourself a great day, and I'll see you next time.